It's me again, Olatunji Shobodu. Today, if you like, just wanted to rant on something, but not just rant haphazardly. Basically, to raise some questions that could help us to appreciate leadership quality by examining some of the things that are happening around us. And today, I just want to focus on the topic the NLC strike, or if you like, the labor strike. I believe the strike is the combination or is sponsored by both NLC and TUC. Um, so you can look at that title as labor strike, leaders or jokers. Labor strike, leaders or jokers. Um, and I've struggled actually. I've struggled a lot, not wanting to get to dabble into this, uh, you know, public stuff. Um, but I don't know why I felt so, um, so eh, impressed upon to just throw up a couple of issues, and in the process, hear my own convictions. And you may call it sentiments if you like, but well, I'm hoping that you can see my perspective and appreciate the points that I'd like just to put out there. And I'm going to be raising issues by raising a lot of questions. A lot of questions. And so, there's an ongoing strike in Nigeria. The Labour Congress, NLC, and the TUC. Um, they are the two key labor unions in Nigeria, and they decided recently to go on a nationwide strike. And question is, what's the reason? What's behind it? So maybe we'll start with the first question. Why strike now? What's the justification in the circumstance? And the general story is that the president of the NLC, Joe Ajaero, went to lead a protest or a strike in Imo State. The idea was to shut down Imo State. And this was a couple of weeks ago. And Imo State, of course, was preparing for the governorship elections. Um, I'm not going to focus on the details of why the NLC president went there and wanted to, motivate a strike to shut down the state. But, um, and I don't think it's important for the issues that I want to speak to. Um, so there was, that attempt. The result of that attempt was that the NLC president, we understood he was either arrested or abducted, you know, but said to have ended up in the hands of some thugs. He claims that the police handed him over to thugs, and he was given a serious beating of his life, um, such that he, had bruises. And there you can see him. To the right is his colleague, the president of TUC. To the left is Joe Ajaero, is the president of the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC. And that's a fallout of, the unfortunate treatment that he received in the hands of the thugs, whoever, you know, whoever they may be. Now, let me make it very clear here that there can be a justification for the way he was treated. Nobody, no citizen of Nigeria should be treated in that manner. We all deserve to be protected, from the hands of um, elements within the society who, foist trouble, who like to make trouble, who like, to undermine our desire to just live a peaceful life and enjoy, the country. So the point is, why strike now? All right. So we understand, as a result of the experience he went through, um, the union decided to go on strike because of the experience he went through. Uh, I guess because maybe they want the people who perpetrated the act to be brought to book, something to be done to show that this is not acceptable. That's my sense of what the motivation behind the nationwide strike is. And of course, NLC is joined by TUC for this purpose. So, my first question is, but why a nationwide strike? Because of that, why a nationwide strike at this time? Is a strike justified in the circumstances? I mean, let's think about it. Why a strike? Why not a protest? Why shut down the nation? Because, you know, with all due respect, the president of the NLC was manhandled, by a collection of talks. Um, I'd like to say I don't see any justification for it to shut down the nation, a nationwide strike. Hello, because of what? Because he was so treated. Not because one is endorsing the way he was treated, far from it. But let's put things in context, which I'll try to do over the course of the next few minutes to buttress the fact that this can be the basis, for trying to shut down the nation. All right. This cannot be the basis. I mean, there is too much at stake right now where Nigeria is for us to be toying with shutting down the nation because of the encounter of one person, whatever the person's position. Okay. So, like I said, I'm going to throw up, a number of questions. So I'm starting with that. And, so I'd like to ask another provoking question. So this strike is because the president of the NLC was manhandled or was ruffled, or brutalized, as the case may be. And I'm asking, what's special about Joe Ajaero? What's special about the president of the NLC? So the president of the NLC in the Nigeria that we know, was rough handled. And so, we have to shut down the nation. Okay. The person is that important. Okay. And, here you would really be at a loss as to why a leader would want a nation to shut down because of the kind of incident that happened to him. I couldn't help but think about, what about others? What about members of his, you know, um, um, uh, members of his own group, whether it's TLC, whether it's NUC? What about the experiences that people have daily? What about, how people have been treated before now? Okay. Now, if you had members of any of these organizations, of any of these unions who have been treated in, this kind of manner in their own immediate circumstances in the same country, and this is known to all of us, people report this kind of treatments here and there. Okay, why wasn't a national strike called? to address their issues. Why is it now? Because, it's a leader of the union that is exposed to what his people have been exposed to for years, that is now provoking a nationwide strike. What's special about the leader? What's special about a leader as to make a leader want to shut down the nation just because of his experience? All right. Is he better than anyone else? Either members of his own union or members of the union of, the other union, or indeed the citizens. After all, we are not all members of the labor union. No, we are not all members of the labor union. But each of us go through issues like this, some worse than his. I mean, we should be happy that it was not even, it wasn't worse than that. The situation wasn't worse than that. We've had instances where some other people weren't quite as lucky, in the hands of thugs, in the hands of cultists, all right? In some cases, caught, in a crossfire. So, why do these leaders want to shut down just because now they have been exposed to what their people have been exposed to historically? All right? Big deal. Are these leaders indeed, or they're jokers? What about other citizens? What about other citizens? Historically subject to all of this. We remember the NSAS issue had to do with things like this. Where were these unions at that time? Okay, why did they not institute a shutdown? How, how loud were their voices at that time? In whose interest is this strike really? In whose interest? So if we're going on strike because the labor union leader had an issue, in whose interest is this strike? Is it in the interest of the union? Is it in the interest of the members of the union? Is it that we're trying to preserve, the profile or the integrity or whatever of, the leaders of the union? What really is it that is the interest that this strike is seeking to pursue? How does this affect the welfare of the people? How is this a priority in our current challenging economic, situation? How is this going to advance the cause of the people that they are leading? How does this help the mandate given to these union leaders? It would be nice because we keep, hearing about the fact that yes, they were offended and all of that. And like we said, nobody is encouraging that by any means. But will that be the basis for embarking on a national strike? I'm still at a loss. Will that be the basis for shutting down everything? Will that be the basis, all right, for creating greater burden for the economy? In whose interest? Or perhaps is in the interest of the individuals who are holding these positions, the leaders themselves? Or could it be in the national interest? Or maybe perhaps it's in the interest of labor, or perhaps even in the interest of the Labour Party, since labor is now so ingrained in politics. And so every action of labor, you find it difficult to separate it from politics. That's the situation in which labor has gotten itself into. But this is such a serious issue that we really need to address to answer that question, to be clear in our minds. Whose interest is this nationwide shutdown seeking or pursuing? In whose interest is this being embarked upon? And it would be a shame if it is simply, pursuing the interest of the leadership. But that's my sense. That's my own interpretation because I find it difficult to see, you know. And I'm asking myself, do these guys understand the Nigerian economic problem, the weight of that problem, how deep that problem is? Let's forget for the moment who caused the problem. Because whether you like it or not, you and I contributed to it, at some level or the other. Yes, the blame is on leadership, but when the chips are down, leadership is at different levels. And it's unlikely that we'll be able to separate some, we can't put the entire blame on leadership, at the national level or even public leadership, even within the context of the private sector and leadership levels in the private sector were contributors to the current challenges. Those who round trip, for example, they are not necessarily public officers. All right. They're private sector people. And that's part of the contributing to the issues. All right. So we can go into the details of that. Okay. But the strike does do damage. It doesn't help an economy that is struggling like that, the Nigerian economy. It doesn't help an economy that is in the doldrums. It doesn't help anyone who is trying to pull out this economy, from what is a very, very bad shape. The truth is that this is not the kind of economy I would like to take charge of. And I salute, everyone who has put themselves forward, either at the level of the president or the level of even ministers or anyone who has, embraced the challenge, okay, and put themselves out to work with the president to pull the economy out and to set it back on a firmer footing. But they strike at a time like this is almost an act of irresponsibility, if not sabotage, because some people can be pulling in one direction and others are pulling in the other direction. It's clear that there is no way that a national strike seeking to shut down everything is going to add any value to the economy. Some people may get excited about it for any whatever reasons. I am not about politics. I am not, I am focusing essentially on what is required to pull this economy out from its very bad state. But it would seem that the so called leaders don't understand how bad things are. And we're still treating the economy with kid gloves. And we're expecting somebody somewhere, to come up as a magician and to just turn things around. It doesn't happen that way. It's not going to happen that way. It's impossible if we attempt, to approach such a serious problem in that manner. We're at a time when all hands need to be on deck, when our differences need to be, put aside, when we need to work together to get the nation's economy back on its feet. There is no way that shutting down the nation by way of a strike will advance that cause. None completely. It does greater damage. It sets the economy back. It unwinds even some of the gains that may have been, realized since the new government came in. So how does that, help these so-called labor leaders? How does that, advance their cause? How does that help their people? Because on the one hand, you are making all kinds of demands for your people. On the other hand, you are shutting down the entire, economy. It would be nice to, educate us on how this kind of response to the uh, experience that the president, of the union had, how it will help. How will this help? What will the strike achieve? Why embark on a nationwide strike instead of a protest? Couldn't the same thing have been achieved with a process? If you were protesting, you didn't have to shut down anything. You didn't have to shut down anything. It probably would have been more dignifying to protest, the treatment of the leader of a group, but to embark on a nationwide shutdown. I mean, it seems ridiculous in my view. It seems ridiculous, and the earlier we begin to think about these things, the better. I I can do all things. Yes, it's true. The Bible tells us, but the writer was saying at the same time, yeah, the fact that you can do all things doesn't mean that all things are expedient. The fact that you can call a strike, doesn't mean that is the right thing to do. There must be a time when we must separate, the wheat from the chaff. This is not the time for this kind of shenanigan, if you like. And then let's look at the issue of going all the way to Imo State on the virtually the eve of an election. That was election season. They were going in for, you know, a gubernatorial election. Why is it that you want to lead a strike at that point in time? Why? Why would you want to do that? What's the motivation? We should ask, what was the motivation? What was the urgency in embarking on a strike that will seek to shut down the state at that time? The stakes were very high. I mean, anyone in the governor's shoes there would be concerned. Yes, it may seem to be in favor of others, who are contesting, but there's no way something like that could have been in favor of the sitting governor. I mean, fear is fear. What was the urgency? By the way, Labour itself, as a party, was going to be involved in that election. Labour was presenting a candidate for that election. The same Labour and, elements relating to Labour, having a relationship with Labour, were now going to shut down a state when election is just, a few hours away or a few days away. What's the motivation? I mean, how insensitive can we be? What's the motivation? Is there something that we don't know that we should? Could the point not have been made after the election? Aren't we sensitive enough that we could be accused of trying to sabotage the election itself since we're presenting a candidate, given that we have now become politicians ourselves by reason of the shape that the Labour Party has taken? Why push for a strike at that time? Like I said, there are many stakeholders in this economy. There are many stakeholders in this society, and Labour is just one of them. So when you are planning your own moves, other stakeholders are watching. Other stakeholders will take steps to counter your moves if they believe that it wouldn't, your moves are not in their best interest. And so the treatment that you got may just have been what you asked for. It's important to look at that also, because if you prompted or provoked certain reactions, then you don't come complaining. If you weren't smart or wise enough to understand that uh, the steps you were going to take could have that kind of backlash, then you have yourself to blame. You do have yourself to blame. And by the way, these kinds of things also happen to other players in elections, not just Labour. So it happens to be Labour now because Labour decided to make a move at a very sensitive time. Somebody should be talking about that. We should be talking about that. Was that itself wise? Is that the kind of thing, that anyone should do? Timing is everything. I mean, Bishop Jakes was saying, timing is everything. Was your timing smart? Was that the best time to attempt to do what you wanted to do? To shut down the state? With election just by the corner, knowing what elections mean in Nigeria and how high the stakes are, is it not a time to steer clear and let the elections pass, and then the issues can be addressed? And if you were so strongly, if you felt so strongly against the conduct of the sitting governor, the election was an opportunity to take steps to dislodge him, to remove him. There's yet another point that I'd like to throw up. When Labour decides on these moves, why disturb and disrupt other people's activities? Because that's what you tend to do. Somebody was talking about the president going into a school and chasing out the students, asking them to go home. I didn't see that clip. I understand it was on national TV. Why would you do that? Like I said, we are not all members of Labour. We are stakeholders in the Nigerian equation. So it's okay if you want to go on strike, even though I think it was not a wise thing to do. Perhaps a protest would have, achieved the same thing, would have made the point, would have, you know, showed, projected that you are sensitive to the, happenings. But you have to understand that the fact that you are protesting should not impinge on the activities of others. You shouldn't shut down my business as a small business owner just because you are protesting. I'm not a member of your union. And so you can express your ideas, you can express your frustrations, but please ensure that it doesn't affect me. I mean, surely we must understand that that's an important element. You can't want a society that works where there is order, where there is decency, and then you take laws also into your own hands by shutting down services and doing all of that you know that many others who are not your members depend on. That can't be the way to run. That can't be the things to do. No, it shouldn't be acceptable. Because when the chips are down, then you can have other people also rise up and contend with you that, sorry, you can protest, you can do whatever you want, but ensure that it doesn't affect us. Because we're not members of your union. Whatever you are doing is the prerogative of your union. But make sure that it does not affect others. Make sure you can take laws into your hands. So when you look at all of these things, I'm asking myself, who is fooling who? Who is fooling who? What's this about? No one is fooled, particularly because of the nature that Labour has taken and the politics that has become now an integral part of, labor itself. And I suspect that even among your members, some must be thinking, so what's this all about? What are we really fighting for? How does this concern us? How does this put bread on our table? How does this enhance our purchasing power? How does this improve our welfare or make life better for us? Who is fooling who? The leader fooling the followers, or the leaders of labor fooling everyone else? And that's why I said, are these leaders or jokers? Because looks like economic sabotage to me. That's my personal opinion. This is not the right time. The issues are not justified. Others have been experiencing this. A protest would have sufficed. What is it that will make us want to shut down in nature an economy that is gasping for breath? In case they are not aware, the economy is gasping for breath. I think one of the reasons that we have taken things fairly lightly also is because we have a government in place who has not bothered about complaining. And maybe that's right. But when you are told that the resources that you really have is just about $3 billion in external reserves, whereas you were being made to believe that you had 32, $33 billion. I tell people you should be happy that the exchange rate is only 1,000 or 1,000 plus, because it really should be a lot worse. I mean, looking at that alone, you know that we should be thanking God that it's not worse than that. But we can't hold on to that for long, because there must be drastic improvements. Otherwise, the exchange rate is not going to head in a direction that any of us would enjoy. That's the truth. And let no one fool anybody. There is no magic that anyone wants to perform that can stop that from happening and still have the economy, standing on its feet. It's a matter of time. If the kinds of things being done now have not been done, it's only a matter of time. The economy will shut down completely, and we will still have been forced to come back and do the needful. We need to stop joking. Leadership is a serious business. That's my concern in all of this. Is this what is called leadership? Are these the same people who have the justification to criticize leaders, to criticize the politicians? Because this is beginning to look like politics itself, and they are beginning to act like politicians, not leaders, jokers. In their own case, jokers, economic saboteurs. If there was so much justification for what they decided to do, a nationwide strike, why force people to join you? Why force people? I mean, it should be overwhelming. But I would imagine that many people in labor themselves cannot see the call for a nationwide strike, embarking on such a strike to shut down the nation and its economy as a right response to what happened to their president. I feel for their president. We feel for their president. But the response is clearly inappropriate. It's clearly inappropriate. If the cause was popular, you wouldn't need to coerce anybody. You won't need to force anybody. You won't need to go into any office and start driving people out. They should volunteer themselves. Why? to demonstrate that they're fully in support of the cause. But I doubt that many will support a cause like that. There's another question to ask, and I'm still going to come and close with a couple of things. What's the purpose of TUC joining? So this was the experience that the NLC leader had. What's the purpose of TUC joining? Why is TUC joining? Now I'm asking myself, is it a case of self-preservation? That, oh, this could happen to me as well, so I'd better support this colleague. Is that the way it should? Is it a case of one good turn? Is it a case of rub my back, I rub your back? Is this what leadership is about? Is this how the two of them are thinking, that this is the best response? And one couldn't say, wait a minute. I mean, there are other ways of addressing this issue. At what point are we going to see, these leaders also understand that there is a lot at stake as far as this nation, as where it is today, is concerned, and that this cannot help us to move in any direction that any of us wants, except perhaps if they have a different agenda. And that agenda can be progress for the nation. All right? There's a sense in which this is a show of hypocrisy, because if you weren't complaining or didn't complain when what happened to this president now, this NLC president, happened to others, your members, citizens, other stakeholders in the same society, in the same economy, why are you complaining now? Because it has to do with you. That's hypocrisy. Hypocritic leadership, the bane of leadership across the world, is on display yet again. It's on display. Why would you, knowing that Labour has a candidate in the coming election, take steps to embark on a strike that will shut down the economy of a state on the eve of election? Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. And these are the same people who will complain about the leaders, who would talk about issues of legitimacy, who would say all kinds of things, who would criticize the politics that people take. Now, power is in your hands. How are you using it? As I thought about this, I thought to myself, one of the experiences that Jesus had. He was in a situation, he was very hungry, and he was told, you have power, turn these stones into bread. Of course, he was tempted to turn stones into bread. He had the power to do so. But he said no. He said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. What was he saying? He was saying, I'm not going to fall into the temptation to abuse the power and the authority I have been given. It is not being given. It has not been given for me to pursue my self-interest. You don't use your power and authority to pursue your self-interest. That we are reacting now, we are calling for a nationwide strike because the president of the labor union was involved in some kind of fracas, and he got a bad deal, which, like I said, nobody's celebrating. But that can be the basis for you to call a nationwide strike to shut down the nation. It's abuse of power. It's an abuse of authority. And that's not the lot of good leaders. That's what immature, hypocritical leaders do. It's a sign that you shouldn't be sitting in that leadership position. If something happens to you, and that's the time that we will use our own instruments to react. Yet they have happened to many of your people. I mean, if you were to call your members to come forward and share their experiences on this matter, you'll be shocked how many people, and some of it, I believe, everybody knows. I mean, all of us know. You can't claim as leaders not to know what happens. These are some of the issues we need to address, as a nation and in the society. But while that is the case, it can't be by way of shutting down the economy. It can't. In this particular instance, the focus seems to me to just be on the leaders. And that's why I say they must be jokers. How is it that you didn't imagine that, this has to do with you? Where is the sacrifice that you're supposed to shoulder, which is one of the requirements of your position as a leader? So is it everything that, works against you, or every bad experience that you have, that you immediately wield the weapon of a strike? Come on. That's not how to deal. That's inappropriate. And by the way, the strategy of the strike, I think that people, you guys should rethink it. It's old fashioned, it's ineffective. And in our particular circumstance, is dangerously expensive. Imagine shutting down power. Imagine all the things that you guys can do. Think about how it affects every other thing, where people, companies, investors, everyone, even government, is trying to make ends meet. And here we are still exposing everyone to losses. The losses accumulated thus far, they are not enough. And then, as a consequence of this kind of, strategy that has not been well thought out, if the companies now decide to start laying off people, then we will come again and say we want to strike. Come on. Come on. This is not where we should be. This is not the kind of thing we should be doing. I would have thought that the labor leaders will think and approach matters like this differently. Why call for a strike, for God's sake? Nationwide. Come on. Time to smell the coffee. We have gone beyond the music has changed. The dance steps need to change. The music has changed. Smell the coffee. Stop the incessant resort to a failing and doom strategy of striking, calling a nationwide strike every time something, small happens. Is that the only way to resolve issues? Stop the abuse of power. It's abuse of power to embark on things like that when matters concern you. And in case you may not be aware, and I'll be ending here, you also risk a backlash because there are consequences for your people who are not having a great time right now, just like many citizens aren't having a great time. But everyone is hoping and believing and looking forward to and working towards experiencing a turnaround. The last thing we want right now is for anything and any group of persons, leaders or jokers, to further worsen our situation. To further worsen our situation. My view is that those leaders look more like jokers today than leaders, because this can't be the way to react to what transpired. And what transpired with the president is not something that should ever prompt or result in a decision to call a nationwide strike. I hope, the leaders will wake up and explore other opportunities to register their grievances. and we think more about the people and not so much about themselves, and work more to ensure that the welfare of their people really improves. And one of the things they need to do is to stop pursuing activities that only result in undermining their people's welfare. As they say, and I hope I'm right, doesn't make sense to cut your nose in order to spite your face. It doesn't make any sense. All right. So that's my ranting. Pretty much unusual of me, but you know, um, it just weighed heavily on my heart, and I guess now I feel lighter. Um, and I hope the purpose for why I had that urge has been fulfilled. So that's me coming to you with leadership insights today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and let's look forward to a call off of the strike, and a resort to better ways of addressing the challenges that we all face. Thank you. God bless you. Bye bye. Olatunji Showodu remains my name. Enjoy the rest of your day and week.